It's always kind of, I still struggle with the whole Spanish to English. I don't know why, I just do. Like, I'm so used to like when it comes to preaching and stuff like that. Like, so used to Spanish. Like, it's like we grew up with it the whole lives. So transitioning, like picking verses and highlighting things, stuff like that has always been kind of. I always tend to go back to like the Spanish. Spanish. I was like, oh wait, no, it's in English. In English. And I mean, you never really would have thought that like it's not a big deal because I mean we talk talk more in it's kind of 50-50. Usually at home it's more in Spanish, but when you're outside it's more in English. And then like in school it's in English and work is in English. But for some reason I don't know why when it comes to like stuff for church, just because we grew up with Spanish so much, it's hard to find. Well, not hard to find, but more like the transition, like the stories and things like that. Like most of the names, I know them in Spanish, even though they're very similar in English. But like sometimes I get kind of not confused, but like, wait, who's that? Who's that in English? And in Spanish, it's like, oh yeah, I know who that is. And the stories, every time I'm trying to look into the stories, I'm thinking about them in Spanish when I'm looking at them in English. I don't know. It's kind of, it's a very, I don't want to say it's weird, but it's just something that I've noticed, and now that I've been talk here and there more in English in church, it's been kind of like my struggle, like trying to look into sermons and verses and things like that. I always look for them in Spanish. And I'm like, oh wait, it's not in Spanish, it's in English. But so pretty much, do you guys the ones that were here on Wednesday, you guys had a pretty good idea what our brother from India was talking about, right? You guys had a pretty good like concept. I noticed too when I was like translating. Sometimes there's some words that are like in Spanish that don't fit in English, and vice versa. And then sometimes I feel like when I was translating, I feel like the context of what he was saying sometimes was lost in the translation of Spanish. So like it's when I was doing that, I was trying to hopefully like those that obviously speak English understood when he was talking. But when I was translating in Spanish, I was like, hopefully they understand the concept that our brother was trying to say. Because sometimes when we translate just like directly from like English to Spanish, in Spanish there's like female and male words and things like that, and sometimes the translation could get lost within the changing of like some words and things like that. So I mean, those that were able to understand English, I mean, we pretty much got a good idea what he was saying. But the ones in Spanish, hopefully they were able to catch on to it. But what I kind of wanted to talk to you today, based on what like my dad was talking in the morning, kind of want to go down the little like ladder, kind of like how we always talk about different themes and things like that, and what I've been wanting to do is just that like sometimes it's spontaneous. Like me talking today, it was spontaneous. I wasn't really aware that I was going to talk until last night. So what I do want to do, hopefully next time I'll try to get a little bit more like a heads up and like prepare. And I do want to kind of go back to how when I first talked to you guys, when I was showing you guys a little bit of history. And what I do want to do is because I think me personally, I always find I like history. I'm a big fan of history, and I feel like without throughout the years here that we've been listening and stuff, I personally think we never really got like an image, like a kind of like a map. And something that I've been kind of curious was we all know about our the Apostle Paul, right? Of how he started off persecuting, and then God showed Himself to him, and then he turned Christian, and then how he was preaching in many different like cities. You guys know the story, right? But do you guys have an understanding of where he did all that stuff, like in the map, like in the world? Like, do you guys have an idea of like the routes he was going through? Where were the cities located? You know, like we hear a lot about Corinthians, not the Philippines, Philippians, Ephesians, Galatia. We hear all these names, and do we really know where they're at? Like where the cities were located? And since I've always been curious about that, I was looking into it. I was looking into the map and seeing like because he did three different like you can say like missionary missions. So each one he took different routes, and each one he stopped at different cities that he didn't stop in the first one. So me looking into it, I was able to see like the map of it and then the routes that he took, and I found it very interesting. And I was kind of like, oh, there's something that I believe not just me, but like other like youth would be interested in, just seeing like a physical like map, a physical layout, the timeline of the routes he took and where he stopped, how much he traveled. Like not to say too much, but when I was looking into the mileage that he traveled, it was estimated about he traveled. I think it was close to like 3 times crossing the U.S., like from Los Angeles to New York, back and forth. So it's like walking that distance. That's how much he walked during the trips. So if you really think about it, I mean, it takes about a week, to drive from Los Angeles to like across the country to New York, and that's if you're going like, nonstop, like at a good 70 miles per hour. It takes like about a week to drive. So imagine walking that, like walking that, and back then they didn't have Nike or Adidas, they had sandals. So I'm pretty sure it was also a struggle, I don't know if they had any chanclas, any sandals. You see what I mean? Any sandals of like brands, I don't know if they had any Nike sandals or Adidas sandals, or they had some for like, how we have the shoes that are like for walking, shoes that are for running, shoes that are for who knows if they had any sandals of like that. But like just looking at the distance that he walked with his companions, it's a lot. And then it wasn't just like like hiking like a normal path hike. It was like a lot of different types of terrains and stuff like that. He took boats at times. So just looking at all that stuff, I got very into it, and looking at all the times, the terrain, the routes, the distance, the cities. So I'm gonna try to do next time. Like I said, if I get a heads up, I'm gonna try to get it like so I can get a couple of images like that of you guys, and then point it out and stuff like that. I think that would be fun for me to like show you guys, and you guys can also see it. So that's what I'm gonna try to shoot for next time. Hopefully with a good head notice. I'll do that so we can. I just find it very. I just think it's interesting, and then maybe if if you guys like it and stuff, I could probably do someone else that you guys would be interested in. Maybe like Moses too. That I was looking into his history, like when he left Egypt, where did he walk to, where did he go and get married, and then we had an idea where like where he saw the burning bush, the mountains, and then things like that. Like kind of. It's a good it's a very good estimate where he did all that. I try to find information, and there's very many different theories and things like that. But with all the information I looked into, there's some that try to go as most accurate to like biblical. So try to go based on the most biblically accurate versions of where he was and things like that. So maybe we do it with Paul. If we see that it's a good thing, maybe I'll try to do it with like Moses, and then different characters in the Bible to see how was their like, but so we can see it physically like on a map and stuff. Because sometimes we hear like the story of David, and it's like, oh, it's just somewhere out there in in the Middle East or somewhere. Like we don't really. I mean, I know where because I've seen it already on the map, but maybe some of us don't really have an idea where it's at. We just kind of picture like a desert or mountain or something. But just to see if like actually from like a good map point of view, I think it's a good perspective of how like where it was, how it looked like, and things like that. I find that interesting. So maybe see if you guys can see if you guys like that. I'm gonna try to do that. But now back to what I kind of want to do. Well, I was wanted to talk to you guys about, like I said, about kind of like a ladder, and like usually for us, when we started off as youth, it's usually the first. What's like the first thing that they tell you when you're like a kid or a teenager? What's like one of the first things that people tell you that you should do? You be obedient, but like a little bit more detailed, like to who? To your parents, right? That's like the very first thing that they tell you to do is be obedient to your parents. So I want to go to Proverbs chapter 1, verse 8. And I'm going to read verse 8 and 9. And I'm going to read it off. It says, "My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. For this shall be an ornament of grace unto thy head, and chains about thy neck." So here in Proverbs, it gives a lot of advice. It's a book about like a lot of different advices and like kind of tips and things like that. It varies from youth to older to younger to fathers, mothers, husbands, wives. But here it comes directly to sons and daughters. It says, "My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother." And right here, when it says Proverbs, "my son," it's a reference to like children. Don't definitely try to be careful nowadays. So try to be very, it says that it's diverse. It's talking about daughters and sons. And it says, "Hear the instruction of thy father," as in like usually when we are something that we can put in our head is when you have like a boss, or in this case like a teacher, and like they give you like instructions. It's kind of like, oh, you follow the instructions. Like if a teacher gives you an assignment, usually it's like follow the instructions of the assignment. So you follow along what they tell you to do, whatever the assignment is. And if you're like working, it's like if your boss gives you an assignment and I want you to file these papers and do this, and he gives you instructions on where, how to do it. So we can kind of see on that dynamic how they're giving us instructions. And it's easy to see it from like a school point of view because it's a teacher, or from a work point of view because it's like your boss. But like when we're in the house, it's a little bit different because you live with your parents, and sometimes it's very easy to not take their word like as seriously, for in the sense because we're there all the time. But like in Proverbs it says, "My son, hear the instructions of thy father," as in usually the father is the one that gives you instructions to do certain things. Like for example, a very common thing for me is when my dad would tell me, go mow the lawn, go take out the trash. Very, very simple stuff like that. And I remember sometimes I never liked doing it. I never liked mowing the lawn. It's a Mexican thing. We're automatically great landscapers. I don't know why, but it is. We just right away know how to mow lawns and landscaping. So my dad would always like, hey, then I would always sometimes kind of, well, not fight, but like argue with my brother, like, no, it's your turn. I did it last week. And he was like, oh, yeah, but I'm doing this. Or you want to do this or you want to do that. So me and him would kind of bicker, like who would mow the lawn or who would do whatever instructions or assignment my dad would give me. Or sometimes we would kind of try to be like, avoid it. Like, oh, it's not that big. It's, there's no need to cut it. And it was now that I'm older, it's a very simple task. It only takes like not even 10 minutes to do. And all you're doing is just pushing a machine. It's not like if you're cutting it by hand. But back then, when you're a kid, it's kind of like, oh, it's a big deal. Mowing the lawn every weekend. And then like, oh, we're going to trim the trees and things like that. Like, oh, we got to cut him and then we got to pick him up. Like, we always saw it as this big assignment that we had to do as kids. But I mean, now that you're older, it's really nothing. I mean, maybe because we've already seen more bigger things that we have to deal with. But as a kid, as a teenager and stuff, seeing those simple things can sometimes be very bothering us. And then I remember sometimes we wouldn't do it. We would just be like, we'll just do something else. And then it wouldn't get cut. And then, like, say he would go out and do something and then come back and be like, hey, how come you guys didn't cut it? And then we would try to find an excuse like, oh, nah, we didn't want to do it and stuff. But then he's like, no, I told you guys to do it. And then it's kind of like one of those things where, for the most part, I mean, we're like, all right, we'll do it. But then there's other kids or teenagers that, for some reason, they start getting some sort of a influence from either other kids or depends on what you see, what you watch online and things like that, to see being rebellious about it, like, I'm not going to do it, or just brushing it off, or ignoring. And for the most part, I thank God that me and my brother, we always were pretty good with that. Like when he would tell us, yeah, sometimes we would like take a while to do it, but for the most part, we would always do it. We never really had that problem of like not following instructions that my dad would tell us when it came to, that's just basic stuff. Sometimes it would be like, like house chores, wash the cars, clean the cars, just basic house chores that sometimes you do on a, when on the weekend, because, during the week you're going to school and working and stuff. And usually on the weekend is when you have the time off to do things like that. And like I said, thank God we usually always did what they told us to do. But then at the same time, when I would like say go back to school and stuff, and some of the like friends would be like, "Oh, what you do this weekend?" and stuff, it's like, "Oh, well, Saturday I had to do house chores," and then, "Oh, but what you do Sunday?" And it's like, "Oh, well, Sunday, came to church," and they would sometimes be like, "Oh, I did this, I did that," and you would kind of feel a little bit left out in a sense, because like, oh, these guys are doing all these things, and I'm over here mowing the lawn and doing chores, and then on Sunday I'm going to church, like. It's really easy to start feeling left out of the group, and there's also, like there's like always, it's a very repetitive thing, but it's a true thing where the influences of other kids, of your peers and stuff. It's always I think the way I see it is, thank God me and my brother, we never had that issue of getting strongly influenced by outside people. And I kind of think it was because since we tended to obey a lot to my dad, and we kind of saw him more as like the authority figure, as like to a certain extent, fear, like a fear of him getting us in trouble. And I think that was implemented at a young age. So we would always like, even though these kids would tell us all these things to do, or like, don't listen to them or things like that, there was always that one thing where we were kind of like scared of getting in trouble and things like that. And knowing that, my dad's the one that disciplined us and stuff. So we were always kind of scared of that. So we never really took our peers' word for, oh, yeah, you know what, yeah, I want to do that. Because we were always, to a certain extent, like, had that, like, that fear. And not in a bad way, because not in, like, an abusive or anything like that. I'm not saying it in that way. I'm saying it more like in a way of, get respect and a good type of fear. Not in a abusive way. But like us seeing that, and then us seeing these kids who they would pretty much do whatever they wanted, and they would tell us like, oh yeah, my dad wants us to do this and do that, but nah, I'm not gonna listen to him. I'm just gonna do my own thing. And we would hear that, or I would hear that a lot from other kids, like, oh yeah, also other friends, female friends, that would be, oh yeah, my mom told me to wash clothes and do this, but I'm not gonna do that. And just starting to see the rebelliousness of other kids. And us being like in a Christian home, seeing how all these things were happening outside, it's very easily to kind of try to, be a rebel yourself and be like, you know what, I'm not going to do what they told us. And there was, to a certain extent, there was always times where, yeah, I mean, me personally, I can always say like, oh yeah, you know what? Like, I think I told you guys a while back how my dad would kind of, when they would invite us to the youth groups or like the youth services, and how I would always be kind of like, oh, well, they kind of always talk about the same thing. The dating thing. And I mean, to a certain extent, it was true. Every time we would do youth outside youth activity, it was always a common thing, the dating. And I mean, I could never get my head around it in a way. Like, why did he always talk about that? Like, why? To like I had mentioned you guys before, that was a point where I was kind of getting over it. So I wouldn't want to go to those things, because I was like, oh, they're going to talk about the same thing. So there was like a time where I kind of felt like that too, like, oh, I don't want to go. So I mean, every now and then I try to like, play it off like, oh, I don't feel good, or I'm sick. You can even say little things like that. But in a certain way, it was a little bit of an influence of the outside world, you can say, that they were just throwing in that seed of rebellious in you, like, yeah, don't go, just say you can't go. So you as a teenager, you're like, you want to be kind of like the cool person. And it depends too, if you're with a group of friends that are very outgoing and things like that, and you also want to be one of the person that's outgoing and things like that. So you try to start doing that little rebellious things and stuff like that. And like I said, going back to the verse where it says, hear the instructions of thy father, we know that like when my dad would tell you to do something, and then you start being rebellious, and then you start becoming with conflict with within the family, and then like it also says here, like, and not forsake not the law of thy mother. So also at the same time, listening to our mothers too as well. That's also a very big important role. Usually, the dad is always the head of the house, and sometimes, I mean, more like us as guys, it's always very easy to push aside, kind of like what your mom tells you, and like, oh, no, I'm just gonna go based on what my dad tells me. And then I believe that's kind of like more of the parenting side, where the parents have to definitely cooperate with each other to see who's the one giving the instruction and making sure that their instructions to their children are not conflicting within themselves. Now that I'm a little bit older, and I've seen, I talk a little bit more to parents and things like that. I see that conflict with parents, how sometimes the dad would be like, oh, I don't know, tell your mom. So the kid will come and tell the mom, hey, can I go get this? No, I don't know, tell your dad. So then, the kid gets conflicted because he's like, well, who do I ask? Because my dad tells me to tell my mom, and then my mom tells me to tell my dad. So it's kind of like, who's the person of authority? Who do I follow instructions? Who do I, take seriously? If they can't even come to an agreement on having me just go out, get some food, or just go out and hang out with some friends, or something very simple. If they can't even agree with that, I believe as a kid, teenager, it brings conflict within yourselves, because you're starting to doubt, like, well, whose authority do I listen to? And then sometimes, which, I mean, I've also heard that when the parents can't decide, like, say, give the kid like, okay, you do it, and then they start bickering, and they start, well, you told him to go last time, and last time I told him he wasn't listening to me, so now you tell him. So then within the parents, they start having problems, and then the kids start seeing that. And so it just slowly starts becoming a big mess. And I think that's the part where, I mean, I don't have any kids, but I think from what I've seen as parents, is that it's always good to be in agreement with each other when you're going to give some sort of like instructions to the children, because I do believe that the children see that. And that's also another thing that I've noticed, is that the small time that I worked at the school and stuff, the kids actually notice things. Like, you would never really think that they'll pay attention or nothing, but they actually notice things, and they notice like teachers and stuff like that. And when you're older, you don't really think about that, but once you kind of work with them, and I'm pretty sure Animal has a pretty good idea of like working with kids, how they are, they're a handful, and sometimes you don't even think that they're paying attention or that, but they do pay attention. And as I'm working with the school, sometimes you do hear, comments and things like that from kids. There was this one time I was at the middle school. The kid was kind of behaving a little bit bad, so I was kind of like, hey man, like, do your schoolwork like that, you can do good, and then you can, go to high school, and once you get to high school, get good grades, and maybe go to college, university. And I remember he was like, nah, I'm just going to be like my dad and work in the fields. They make a lot of money. I was kind of like, oh, man, it doesn't work like that, man. Like, I know he's a kid. He didn't really understand too much, but I was kind of like, nah, it doesn't work like that. It's a lot of hard work being in the fields. It's not easy work. It's a really hard work. You have the opportunity to do better. Like, just because you see your parents doing that, don't think it's easy work. It really isn't. But like, going back to what I was saying, is that kids notice things, maybe that kid's parents never really told them anything like, oh yeah, come to the fields. I'm pretty sure they didn't. I'm pretty sure the parents don't want their kids to be like that. They want them to be better, especially if they were born here in the U.S. They want them to be better. And that's kind of like the whole point of those parents coming here, is to making sure that the kids get a better life, education, and things like that. So I'm pretty sure this kid's seen, obviously he's a kid talking in ignorance and saying like, oh yeah, I'm just going to be like him working in the fields. But going back to like, they notice things, they see things, and, sometimes they might hear his parents talking to some other friends, no, in Spanish, no, este cheque me salió bien bueno, like stuff like that. You hear maybe comments like that, and the kids are like, oh, they hear it because, like I said, they do pay attention. They notice a lot of things. They'll probably hear that like, oh man, my dad's making a lot of money. He said que el cheque le salió bien bueno, So you start little things like that. It's very tedious, very small things, but like I said, the little that I worked at school, and I'm pretty sure, like I said, Annabelle has seen it way more, that the kids notice so many things that you don't even think they do. So going back to the thing with instruction is how with the parents, try to make the just kind of my advice is like with parents is try to make sure you guys are in agreement when you guys give your child some sort of instructions and things like that. Or even me, take my own advice too. In the future, make sure I have good communication with my wife and stuff. So like that, we do give instructions. I can also be a good parent. And kind of saying, going back to what I was saying is the basics. As teenagers, it's even us as adults. With our parents. Well, now once you're a little bit older, you get into the work world and you start having more adult problems. Paying bills and paying stuff on time, making sure you don't go past your credit cards. Like more adult, more things that now you can kind of relate to with your parents, in a sense, and you can actually now, of course, you always see them as parents, but you can, in a way, kind of start understanding them more, maybe why they were the way they were at that time, because maybe they were struggling with certain things. And as you get older, you start seeing and realizing, oh, yeah, like I've heard comments of some people say, like, I never realized my mom was going through such a hard time. And now that I'm older and I realize how hard it was, I feel really bad for behaving the way I did, or trying to always throw things back at their face, or things like that, because when you're young, you don't really understand things. But also as a parent, well, not me, but as parents, I'm pretty sure that they try to like not obviously bring their problems to their kids. It's because you try to. The way I see it is, you try to protect your kids. It's a very common thing to protect your kids and not show them like like the hard, like if you're going through something, try to give them in a sense of like everything's, I'll take care of you. As protective parents, I'm taking care of you, I'm protecting you. It's my job as a parent, so like don't worry about stuff. And sometimes us as we're teenagers or youngsters, we don't really think of that stuff, so we always tend to throw things back at our parents' face, and because we don't understand what's going on. So I think it's also a very thing for us as like I said, now that we're a little bit older, we understand things like that. And it's funny because there's a lot of things that like nowadays, like for example, like going back to the mowing the lawn, now that I go out and now that I've been in a way looking for a house and stuff, or just looking around, I see a house from the outside and I see that the painting is coming off, or the lawn looks like a jungle, and you see like, oh man, that looks horrible. Back then when you were a kid, you wouldn't think of that, like the house, whatever. But now that you're older and you're looking for a house or something, you're kind of like, oh man, the yard looks terrible. And it's kind of like, oh, no wonder my dad used to tell me, oh, cut the grass because look how bad it looks. But like it's stuff like that you don't realize until like you're older. And then you're kind of like thinking, because I've thought about that where like, okay, let's say I get my house and the lawn is bad. Now I'm going to be telling my kids to mow the lawn. Now, so now I'm going to be doing what my parents were telling me. You mow the lawn, clean this, wash the cars, And then back then you were kind of like, oh, why are they telling me to do this? I would always kind of tell them, like joking around, it's the weekend, it's free time, God rested on Saturday, why can't we? Things like that. I was just joking, but now that you get older, like I said, you start realizing a lot of things. But I think as important as since like about, let's see, I think about 80% of us here are still kids, younger, teenagers, adolescents. You guys should definitely start considering more that sometimes when your parent tells you something, it's not really much because they're trying to punish you, or well, I've heard this too before, like, oh, like trying to make you a slave and, like stuff like that. It's not really that, It's like, they're telling you for a reason, especially here in the church. And we need to come with consideration that if we're here in church, it's because they're telling you something. It's not because they're trying to make you feel like you're being punished or something. It's just like, it's an instruction. And if your parents tell you to do something, do it. It's like I said, I've seen it before too when, giving back like attitude, even though you do it something, but you're giving attitude. I don't know if I'm pretty sure like all of us have done it, and I know I did it a few times. We're like, "Hey, go watch the cars," and be like, "Oh, otra vez again," like I just watched it last week, stuff like that, and then usually the typical parent like, "No me respondes así," nah, nah, but try to try to be because I mean, so far I didn't get to that point, but I mean, I've seen it. We've seen it, we've heard it, and there's some kids who, I mean, that's just very basic. I've seen and heard about some kids when like the parents tell them to do something, some chores, they respond back like more harsh. Sometimes they even like yell at them and things like that, and then that's already you not having respect for your parents, and then that's also a very bad thing. Even though you're gonna do the whatever they're telling you to do it, yeah, you're still gonna wash the car, but by them telling you and then you giving attitude, I mean, that's also not a good thing. Just because you're doing the work, that doesn't mean that it's that, oh, well, I did it regardless. I did it, so whatever. But it's like, nah, no, you didn't do it in the correct way, in the sense of you're giving back attitude. That's also not a good thing. If your parents tell you to do something, even if, let's say, because I also notice that sometimes when we're young, in our little world, we think because we're doing something, for us it's like a big thing, but for them it's like, no, you're not doing nothing. Like you're just wasting time. But you in your little world, you think you're doing something big, and instead of you, the way I would have thought about doing it is like, let's say if you're doing something, and you can always, instead of responding back to your parents like, oh, can you see I'm doing something, like rude, you could always be like, yo, okay, I'll do it right now. Can I please finish this, and then I'll do what you tell me to do. Try to be more respectful towards your parents. And like I said, when we're young, like I'm trying to think of something that maybe I could. Like back in the day when I was in high school, I used to really like playing paintball and stuff like that. So I remember this one time I was really into like when the guns would like jam or something. I would like to take them apart and check what was wrong with it. So I remember one time I was with a paintball gun. I took it apart. The spring where the paintballs would shoot was like clogged or something. So I was taking it out, cleaning it, putting oil on it. And my dad's like, "Hey, will come and help me throw away this trash and stuff, because they're gonna close over there where they throw the trash. So we gotta load it up before they close." And you don't really understand. Well, I'm doing this. I'm fixing this. I gotta finish this. He's like, "No, this is more important. Like we gotta." I'm like, no, I got to finish the gun because I'm going to play tomorrow. And in your own little world, you think that's important. But, like, when you're older, you're like, nah, they're going to close. I need to throw this trash, man. Like, because if not, I'm going to have to wait a whole other week. And then if you have something going on the next week, you're not going to be able to do it. So once you're older, there's different scenarios. But as a kid in your own little world, you think that's important for you when it really isn't. Like, for example, I think I did went and helped him do it, but I do remember at that moment I did tell him like, well, I gotta finish this, like I'm gonna play tomorrow, and then I remember he was all like, you're gonna play, I gotta go throw this away. This is more important than your gun, and I was like, oh, all right, whatever, all right. And then it didn't even take that long; it was like 10 minutes, but kind of giving like a bad response to something like that. Always try to be very respectful. I always, like I said, for the most part, I can't really remember a time where I was like really disrespectful or anything like that, and thank God for that. But definitely I have seen some kids and be disrespectful and things like that, or heard complaints from parents saying that their kids are very disrespectful. And that's something we got to be really careful with. Even right now, that we thank God we still have our parents. Sometimes I know I see it for sure. Like us that are older, is how sometimes our parents like tell us to do something in a sense, and you're kind of like, oh, come on, like that's not a big deal. Like I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of something because it's funny because it happens all the time, and I always think about that stuff. Like for example, I'm trying to think of a scenario that I've been through where. Okay, for example, so we have two washers in the house. And I remember mom once is all like, hey, help me set up the settings because it's like a newer one. So, sometimes the new ones are all like kind of like touch screens. So it's a little bit, to get the settings is different than the older one. So I remember she was kind of like, hey, help me set up the washer. And I was all like, well, what do you mean? You've been washing your whole life. Don't you know how to use it? And you think about little stuff like that, and then but once you're there in that position, you see how like okay, this one's newer. Like there's different settings. It's more the other one you just turn the knob. On this one, it's actually more settings and stuff. So you're kind of like, oh crap, like that's not really. I shouldn't have said that, because it's kind of like she's not gonna know because it's newer. But now that we're older, it's kind of like, well, you've done it your whole time, like do it yourself, kind of not in a rude way, but it's kind of like you've been washing clothes like for so many years. Like, how do you not know how to use it? But little things like that. It's but like as a kid, I mean, you don't really. I mean, I don't remember as a kid really going over there and washing clothes. I mean, like I said, there's some people that are different, that grew up in different households and stuff like that, and sometimes maybe you did. Well, I'm talking more as a kind of like a guy's perspective, because also for for the females, a completely different perspective. Of course, the ladies were doing more of the washing and cleaning and stuff like that. I'm just kind of saying it from like a guy's perspective about. That's why I always come up with the example of mowing the lawn and stuff, because that's what we would do. I mean, my sister, she grew up a little bit older, so now that I'm older, she grew up, and I can still kind of see that. My mom tells her to do all the cleaning stuff, something that I didn't really do. Me and my brother didn't really do. It was always my mom. But now we see it from like a different point of view, like my mom telling her to do the cleaning and stuff. And we're like, oh well, we never had to do that, but it was because we were more like the guys who were doing more of the outside work. But it goes both ways. I'm not just trying to be like, oh, it's just those guys that go through this. No, I'm pretty sure females go through the same scenarios, just like different. Like when it comes to like for me, it's mowing lawns and stuff like that, and washing cars and things. I'm pretty sure for females, it's more like washing clothes, dishes, and folding the laundry, drying the laundry, and cooking. Usually the roles, and that's something too that I kind of want to elaborate just a little bit more. Is that how nowadays, I'm pretty sure you guys are all aware of how the society has kind of really brought like the whole masculine and feminine thing, like, oh, we are all equal and all of that. And I do believe under the law, yes, we are all equal under the law. If a guy robs, he's going to get in trouble. If a girl robs, she's going to get in trouble, under the law. But I do believe too that like in our respective homes and wherever we're at, it is also important for us to carry our individual roles. Like for example, as let's bring it back to like when I was a teenager and stuff. As a son, I do believe that I should help of course I help my mom too, but as a son, help my dad with roles that involve more like masculine attention. Building. Like when the backyard where we did all the cement, me and my brother helped my dad do it, and it's more physical labor stuff that is more directed to male roles, and going back to also like on the female side, like feminine, playing your role where like your roles are to help your mom in whatever feminine roles there is, and I do believe it's important because once you get older, and then let's say you want to build your family. I for sure am taking in consideration all these roles that I played as a son, in a sense of making sure any maintenance in the house is taken care of, little simple things like that. But it's more like a role as a male that helps to provide and protect, and then more like on the female side where it's to support, nurture, care for, a lot of people try to say like, oh no, it's the same. It's like no, we have different roles, and I do believe that starts off as when we're kids and young people and younger, where as sons we listen to our father, and of course our mother as well, but we tend to direct more to listening to our father, and then younger ladies when they listen more to their mothers, and it's more for the sense of that going back to that thing where each of us plays a different role. And that I do believe that helps in the end make a strong family. Once you get older, you have your own family, playing your roles. Of course, in a sense, support each other. I'm not saying just do one thing and then that's it, and the female do one thing and that's it. No, of course, help and support each other. Kind of went a little different route, but the other thing I wanted to talk, and that's more on the topic of being listen to your parents. Be obedient to your parents. But not also just be obedient, but once you're doing the tasks that they provide, be respectful to your parents as well. Try not to show any attitude, or don't show any attitude, or any talking back or anything like that. And then if you believe if you're doing something at that moment that for you is important, instead of talking back or anything like that, talk to your parent, whoever is asking you to do something. Be like, hey, I'm doing this right now. Is it okay if I do it in 10 minutes? Or does it need to be done right now? Instead of talking back or anything, it's always a great thing to be respectful to your parents and listen to them as well. And since the time is cutting short, I do want to I'm going to jump ahead and be to, let's see. I want to go to Psalms 25, chapter 25, verse 7. Chapter 25, verse 7. All right. So it says, remember not the sins of my youth, nor my transgressions. According to thy mercy, remember thou me for thy goodness' sake, O Lord. So right here, we can kind of see how be mindful of kind of be mindful and walk in like God's direction. Taking on consideration what I had mentioned about listening to our parents and things like that. And that's just kind of like, I do believe that's kind of like the basis of in the direction of walking with God, in the sense, because once we get that obedience with like someone that's in a sense higher, more authority than us, which is our parents. Once we, let's say, get a little bit older, go to college or go to work or anything like that, we're not interacting with our parents in that sense because we're at a job, because we're at school, or any other thing. Now, the other person that we have as a father figure is God. That's a very that's another way we can take this in consideration of being. I do believe if we're obedient with our parents at a younger age and listen to them, once we get older, it's going to be way easier for us to follow and be obedient to God. It's like a thing that kind of it's like a balance. Being obedient with your parents, because it's the only sense of authority that we see as a young, besides, like I said, our teachers, but it's like one of the only things that we see more because we live there. We live at home, so we see our parents all the time, besides when we're obviously in school. And let's say once we get that narrowed down, our other purpose would be, walking in the direction of God, being in church and having God as like the father figure, is for us to be obedient, for us to be disciplined, not like I said, not kind of goes back. It's funny how it correlates with each other. Now talking back to God, I mean, yeah, we might not be having you can say direct 101 conversation like me and another person would right here. But just like talking back to God in the sense of like if something is not going your way, like, oh, why is this happening to me? Not having trust in God, talking back in that sense, or like being disrespectful in the sense of like, God wants you to do, be humbled and be honest, and the way you can, and then especially if people know that you're already a Christian. Once people know that you're already a Christian, all that stuff definitely makes more of an impact. Like if you're a liar, or you're lying, and people know that you're a Christian, in a sense, you are being disrespectful to God, because you are putting yourself in the position, hey, I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Christ, but yet I'm doing all these other things. I'm lying, I'm cheating, I'm stealing. So that automatically shows disrespect to God. It shows that you're not being obedient. It shows that you're not being trustworthy. It shows that you're being rebellious. And it goes, like I said, once we narrow down the behaving and being respectful and listening to our parents, it's really easy to make the same connection with God, since we have to listen, we have to obey, we have to, try to follow as righteousness as we can. Of course, we're gonna have a bunch of different transgressions. We're gonna have different troubles, problems. Maybe some of us deal with problems differently and stuff, but that doesn't mean that God's not with us. That doesn't mean that God's not going to help us, provide us. And like our brother was saying on Wednesday, is try to be humble. Humble and be an honest person. It's nowadays I do believe it's really hard to find that humbleness in people because, especially with social media. Social media has everybody's egos going really sky high. Everybody thinks they're better than the other person. I have more likes. I have more followers. I have more, more credibility. I have more credibility in what I say because I got more people that follow me. Just all those things. It's really easy to get your ego up in the air. But I think for us as Christians, let's say we are doing good. Let's say we have a good, we're doing great in school or we're doing really great in work. We get promoted and stuff like that. It's also easy for us to get in our heads and start behaving in not a godly manner and not being humbled and not being honest either. It's really easy because I've seen it with people who start off really humble and they start doing good, and sometimes that promotion or that may be helpful financially or stuff outside here in the world, but like your spiritual self is the one that's suffering because towards the end you're not listening no more to what God wants from you. You're not being obedient to what God's asking of you, and that's one way that I can compare the both of them, as in listening to our parents at a younger age, because I do believe that from my experience, when you're growing up as a kid. And all of you guys can put yourself in that position. Like when you're growing up as the ones that are kids right now, the ones that are listening right now, you can maybe hopefully remember this in the future. But like once you're starting off as a kid, 5 years old, 10 years old, and then 15, most of us can remember to a certain extent, like when we were kids. You remember maybe a time where you were like rude to your parents, or you remember a time where you were helping your parents with something. I think for sure I can definitely remember, and I definitely correlate with that about is we used to live in the ranch, and her dad used to go there to do the killing and stuff. She would always be there helping out and stuff. And I remember seeing that, and because back in the ranch I was about maybe like 10 years old, 9 years old, around there, 10, 11. So at about 2, she was, an adolescent age, and I can remember that, her helping out, her parents working and stuff like that. As when you're a youth, you remember things like that. I definitely remember that stuff. Or when I think I was probably even like 6 or 5. I was a really young kid. When we were at the church across the street, I remember when we were remodeling the church. It's very vague memories, but I remember helping. I don't know about what I was doing really, but I remember kind of helping out in one way. But just little things like that, like as a kid, you as you're older, you start remembering little things like that, of you being obedient, of you listening to your parents, of you helping your parents. You get, I know I get every now and then little flashbacks of things like that. And I believe now that we're older, or as we're getting older, we can always use that and be kind of like, I remember helping my parents and being useful to them. Let me be useful to God and be help others, help others, be an honest person, be a humble person. I remember, like, thinking about, like, I remember helping my parents with this. So, maybe I'll help in the church in one way or another. It needs cleaning or something's very simple. Like, I'll help out. Or we have like another activity, just simple stuff as in helping out. And yeah, it may not be an exact representation of you doing something when you're younger, like helping out physically, but talking about it more in the spiritual senses of like we're helping in God's kingdom, we're helping in God's church, we're helping in this like community. It's a different type of help, but it goes hand in hand in one way or another. And kind of want to conclude with that. And hopefully you guys were able to get an understanding of what I was trying to comprehend, in the sense of comparing listening to our parents and being obedient to how, as we get older, listening to God and understanding what God wants from us, being humbled and being an honest person. That's kind of like what the main theme that I kind of wanted to get out of comparing both And I know our time is short, and you can go way more deep with way more examples. But that's kind of like what I wanted to focus on, is as us that are, I mean, like me, that I'm a little bit older, but like some of you guys that are still growing up and going through those stages, is remember to always be obedient to your parents, be respectful, listen, always help them out when you get a chance. And in a sense, you can always use that and move it over to your spiritual sense of listening to God, being humble, being kind, listening, praying, reading your Bible, just being obedient to what God's asking from you. And like I said, next time I do talk, I do want to definitely try to do that. Try to project like the images and stuff about the Apostle Paul, about his journey. I definitely do want to try to get like some. I'll try to get a little bit more into it too, in a sense of check out what they were wearing. I think that would be a pretty good idea too, to check what they had. I'm pretty sure they didn't have like shorts and tank tops, or and I'm pretty sure they didn't have like snapbacks for the sun or sunscreen, or sunglasses. So I do want to kind of get a good idea of how they were dressed, like, so we can see. I like history, so I really like seeing that stuff. So I want to see like the Apostle Paul. How was he? What was he dressed like? And what was he? Was he walking in Nikes or in Yeezys? That's. But like, what was he using? What was he traveling with? Like try to see like, what did he eat? Did he stop by McDonald's, or did he go to Chick-fil-A? But like, what did he eat along the way? I also like little things like that. What was his source of like water? Did he have a hydro flask or just like little stuff? I think I personally like that. I like seeing like we can get an image of like maybe an idea what they had during that time, and see what they use in their travels. So we can understand more about like the struggles that that he went through, and not in the sense of being put in prison and beaten and things like that, but just like the sense of just walking in the condition that they were in. I want to try to get more into it, and so next time it's my chance to talk with you guys, I'll try to have that ready for you guys. All right, so we can stand up and do a quick prayer before we go. Okay, Father God, thank you for this blessed day. Thank you, God, for keeping us all safe, keeping us here. And also, God, thank you for giving me the privilege to be here and talk to the youth, and to help us understand what you want from us, and help us to be obedient to our parents, listen to our parents, be respectful to our parents, and in a sense, to use that to be respectful to you, God, and listen to you, God, to your word, and be humble and be kind and be honest, and be a good representation of what being a Christian is, even though some of us might be going through different tribulations. But God, you're there for us, and you help us every day. And please, God, help this youth, and help us too to be servants of you, God, in this world that so many things happen. There's so many changes going on, and help us to have a strong foundation in you, God. And at the same time, help our parents so they can also have a strong foundation with you, God, and help give them the support that they need so they can also grow spiritually, and they can also help us be better children, and at the same time be better children of you, God. In your holy name, amen.